How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Real Northern Bass, and this is Jig Fishing 103, which is part 3 of 4 in this Jig Fishing 101 series. Jig Fishing 101, we covered the basics, which went over pretty much every single type of jig there's out there and what they're ideally suited for. Jig Fishing 102 covered rods, reels, and line, and now Jig Fishing 103, we're going to cover both cadence, really now getting into the heart of how to fish a jig. So again, cadence, weights, and which direction you may want to go, either light or really heavy, and then different material types, and not just in the head, but also skirt material, depending upon what application it is. So we've covered everything for what kind of jigs you want, the gear you want to throw on it. Now we're really getting into how exactly do you fish it, and what do you change pending conditions to get the most out of what it is that you're fishing. Let's start with the basics and go over cadence first, because that is one heck of a can of worms to open up. What do I mean by cadence? Cadence is the pace and the method that you retrieve your jig. Whether you're just straight retrieving it or you've got it on the bottom and you're slowly working it back to the boat, how fast are you doing that? How slow are you doing that? How many pauses are you working in? If you're working it in warmer temperatures and you're working it more violently or more aggressively, how violent are you working it? How aggressively are you snapping your jig? Anything in all of that covers cadence. For me, I'm typically a much slower, methodical angler more often than not. Plenty of days where I like to go and fish really fast and it works really well, but I really enjoy finding a good area that I know holds fish and taking my time and picking it apart inch by inch as meticulously as I can. So my cadence tends to be really slow. Let's break it down season by season though to really give you an idea of what cadence typically does best as we go from ice out or really cold water wherever you are in the country, but especially in the northern country, talking ice out, all the way to the peak of summer. Because everything we talk about from that cold water to the hottest water you're going to get during the year, coming from that hot water all the way back down to ice in, you're doing the same thing just in reverse order, so I don't need to repeat myself coming back into winter. So as far as cadence goes, when we're dealing with really cold water, say ice out up until about low 50-degree water, even just calling it 50 degrees. More often than not though, we're talking that cold water, my cadence is very slow. I am fishing all of my jigs, typically a football jig, whether it's a skirted jig or maybe something like the Hustler Hybrid Finesse jig that I covered from Beast Coast Fishing, a naked football head with the Kitech on the back or any other swim bait, doesn't matter. Anything like that, I'm keeping it on the bottom no matter what I do. Every time I move it, I'm trying to just move it as slow as I possibly can for very short distances. That is my cadence. To add to that, the other cadence isn't just the movement, it's the time between movements. The colder the water, the slower and shorter my movements are, and the longer my pauses are in between the next movement, from the first to the next. That is my cold water fishing general rule of thumb. I want to go as slow as I possibly can, and I will pick about a middling size profile to a very small profile because that has been insanely consistent for me for years. It is not the only solution or the only way to do it. Just for me, for getting somebody more comfortable with trying to pick up jig fishing, and especially in that colder water, that is by far the most consistent way, my cadence, that I have found in that really cold water. Really slow, keep it on the bottom, longer pauses. A specific example is I will be fishing for smallmouth and or largemouth. They all tend to stack kind of in the same areas in that really cold water. I'm fishing deeper water more often than not. I will get my jigs down the bottom. I will let them hit the bottom and I won't touch them for 15 to 30 seconds. And from there, I will move at about this pace, 6 to 12 inches. And I'm gonna wait 15-ish seconds. And I'll rinse and repeat. And I'll do that for about a half an hour in an area that typically early in the year, I'm going to places that I've already had success with, so I don't have to try and kind of refigure them out. And I just know that that's going to work in one of 3 or 4 different areas. If that isn't working, I will slow it down before I start speeding it up because I'm dealing with very cold water. These fish are more likely than not still going to be very lethargic, so I want to give them time to be able to see the bait and then just let it sit there and let them decide if they're going to make up their mind, if they're going to take the risk of trying to eat it and then potentially having to chase it if they miss, they didn't pick it up on the first bite, whatever the case. I want them to take their time and make that decision. So if that 15-second pause doesn't work, then I'll go up to a 30-second pause. Rarely do I need to go longer than that. There are very few occasions where I've had to wait upwards of a minute. Those are brutally tough days. They don't happen that often, but it's something to keep in mind because sometimes it is necessary to slow down even that much. Now we come out of that colder water. Now we're in that 50 degree, really kind of 50 degrees for like several consistent days. And now you've got a string of weather coming that you know the water's going to do nothing but climb at this point. You can start fishing it a heck of a lot faster. Regardless of where you're at the time of the year, as the water continues to get warmer and warmer and warmer, you can go faster and faster and faster with your presentation. Now my cadence isn't just a drag, pause, and wait. It might be a drag and a hop and a drag and a hop, or just hop, hop, hop. It doesn't matter. Either way, now as the water warms up, I'm starting to not only increase how quickly my movements are on the jig, but also the amount of movement that I'm doing in that singular movement. So I'm moving it faster and I'm moving it further. I'm going from insanely slow 6 to 12 inches to moderate pace for 2 to 3 feet at a time. And I might be working in a hop. Everything is warming up. So not just the bass, everything is warmed up. Everything is moving a lot faster. So I'm just trying to increase my pace, my cadence to match everything else that's going on in the lake. As I get into even warmer months, now we're talking truly post-spawn. Surface temps are mid to upper 60s, if not closer to 70 degrees at this point. From that point, all the way up to whatever your peak surface temperatures are. As you come up to peak, that's the cutoff point, because there's going to be a long period where you have peak surface water temperatures. Leading up to that point, coming out of post-spawn to, say, 80 degrees. Now I'm fishing very aggressive. I'm moving the bait a lot. I'm working in more aggressive hops out of my jig. I'm trying to really rely on that reactionary strike, so I need to have a lot of movement to get those fish, to see it hone in and just reactionary. Whoa, I like to eat whatever that looks like, and it's moving fast. I better go get it now while I still can, even if I gotta run 20 feet to go get it. That's where my cadence really starts to pick up. It isn't until the dead of summer, where now you're a month into extremely hot weather, do I find that sometimes I need to kind of reel that back in a little bit and slow it down, or I'm doing extremely aggressive movements. So my cadence is absolutely insane at this point, where people call it stroking a jig, where I will work on the outside line of some deeper grass. I know the bait fish are there. I know the bass are not that far behind, or they're right in there with them. And I am aggressively trying to elicit a reactionary strike out of these bass. So I will take that jig and I will grab the butt end of my rod and I will crack it. And I'm trying to get that jig to violently rocket 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 feet up off the bottom and then fall on slack line. And I'll be doing that with a slightly heavier jig, but we'll get into weights in a minute. And I'll pause for just a second and I'll do it again over and over and over non-stop, because I'm just trying to get as much action as I can, as quickly as I can, to get in front of as many fish as possible until I find the ones that are really interested in feeding. Sometimes they slow things down a little bit, and now I'm just kind of going back more into that early, late pre-spawn where I'm constantly moving it, but my movements are still a little bit slower. I'm keeping it on the bottom a lot more. I'm only working a little hop here and there. I like to do what I call a power shimmy, where I'm kind of bouncing the rod tip along, but the jig is just kind of scooting on the bottom. It's not hopping along, it's just scoot, scoot. Still maintaining bottom contact, but I'm imparting action as I'm dragging it. That's what I call my power shimmy. That's kind of all my different cadences. To really give you specific examples, we need to have very specific scenarios and conditions so that I can be more elaborate in what else I could talk about for cadence. To understand what you need to change, that's going to come with time and experience on the water, or you can talk to people that are very well versed in jigs at very specific times of the year that you're trying to get more definitive information on. So just keep that in mind. Again, by all means, reach out to me at any time if you have very specific questions on any of my social media. I'm happy to answer that. But that's cadence in a nutshell. Now, weights. Almost no wrong or right answer on this, but there are different times of the year where really the weight on your jig, even if you are just relying on it to be on the bottom and get a bite off the bottom, can still really matter as to what that weight is and how it's getting to the bottom. So case in point, when I'm fishing for really cold water smallmouth, either very early season or late in the season, I'm fishing deeper water. I tend to be fighting the wind more often than not, unfortunately. It's just the way it is up here in the Northeast. And even though I'm fishing down anywhere from 35 to 65 feet of water, I'm trying to fish on the bottom. Ideally, I'd love to be throwing a 3/4 ounce football jig, but I can't always do that because it falls so fast that it actually scares the fish off. So even though it does a phenomenal job of getting to the bottom and staying on the bottom, I've already lost that fish's interest because it came rocketing down so fast that it was extremely unnatural, and it spooks those fish off. So I have to go with a much lighter weight that falls at a much slower, steadier rate so it doesn't startle a fish because the fall rate is so out of place. So in that colder water, I tend to go with 3/8 more often than not. I try to get away with a 1/2 ounce where I can. If I really truly can't feel the bottom, then I will sacrifice and go to a 1/2 ounce, knowing that I'm going to have to go a lot further on my cast so that the amount of strike zone, the amount of water that I'm potentially getting that jig in front of a fish is greater. So, in that first 50 feet of my cast, I'm probably going to lose any chance on those fish because it's going by them way too fast. But once I've got past that 50 feet and now I'm working that last 100 to 150 feet, then I've got a solid chance of getting those fish because they didn't see how fast it came rocketing down. They just see the right profile of what they want to eat, and it's moving at that right cadence. So that's really where weight can come into play on the light side of things, and colder water when fish can be a little more fickle. Doesn't always have to be colder water. Same thing can be said in really hot water when conditions are calm and the fish are a little more fickle. That's one perspective to look at it. To completely flip it on its head, then the other perspective is go as heavy as you can and go purely for reactionary strikes. And that also works. That works often, and especially in warmer water. Colder water, not as much. I would still say that is not the correct decision to go with, even if it's easier. But in warmer water, there's a lot to be said where in one hand you can go really light, say a 1/4 ounce or a 3/8 ounce, and that allows your presentation to fall really slow. Say you've got a Flippin' Delight from Beast Coast Fishing for your trailer or a Rage Craw from Strike King, and you've got it falling 3/8 ounce, it's falling really slow, and you can see the legs kicking the whole way down, and those fish can see it from a short distance or a moderate distance, but they can track it the whole way down, and they can say, oh, wow, yeah, I saw that. That looks like the thing I want to eat. I can go over and find it, because you throw it in grass, they see it fall through that window, and they're already tracking as it's falling down. They can follow after it. One school of thought. Now we finally get to the other side of that school of thought. Going extremely heavy. You cover water insanely fast, and you're going purely for reactionary strikes. And there's a lot to be said about that too. You don't want the fish to get a good look at what you're throwing. You just know that, you know what, they're gonna eat something like a crawfish out here. Or if you adjust your jig presentation accordingly, make it look like a bait fish, whatever the case. You know that they're in this particular area, be it a rock pile or a thick patch of grass or milfoil, whatever the case. And you're just going for extreme efficiency and pure animalistic reactionary strike. Now you're going 3/4 ounce, 1/2 ounce, 3/4 ounce, 1 ounce jig, whatever the case. You want it to rocket by them so that they can't stop to think about it. They're just, pea-brain takes over and says, ooh, food, and they go after it. It's fun doing it like that too because you get to fish fast, and let's face it, a lot of people would rather fish fast than fish really slow and just try and slow drag and meticulously climb through every single square inch of cover. Nope, give me a 3/4 ounce jig. I'm gonna flip, dunk, dunk, nope, reel it in, flip, dunk, dunk, and just bang, 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 bang as fast as you possibly can going through everything. And that can really work. Again, I'm gonna go back to this. I said it in the last episode, I've already said it in this, I'm gonna say it again. There is no right or wrong answer. There is definitely a better answer in some specific situations, but there's not necessarily it has to be this way and that's the only way to do it for the vast majority of cases. You have to experiment with it and play around with it. But generally speaking, I laid it all out where a lighter weight would be better in some situations, more often than not, than in other situations, or other weights in those same situations. Just keep an open mind for what you're doing. Last but not least, we get into materials. Now really, there are 3 primary materials that most jigs are made out of. You've got tungsten, lead, and tin bismuth. What really is the benefit from one to the next when you're going from tungsten to lead to tin bismuth? The most obvious thing is cost. Tungsten is by far the most expensive for a good reason. It is a phenomenal material. It's also very dense. Then you have lead, which is much more common. That's not as expensive. Then you get your tin bismuth, which I have at least personally found from the little that I have bought, tends to be the cheapest. Although I tend to also find that is used more at that hobbyist level or very small business level of jig builders out there. How does any of that really matter when it comes to making your jig choices? Well, let's start with bottom composition and feel and that feedback you get from it. Tungsten is the densest, the hardest of those materials, so you get incredibly good feedback of what it is you're dragging that jig over. But because it's more dense, it's also a smaller head profile. So that sometimes is both a good and bad thing depending upon what it is you are trying to accomplish with that particular jig. Some football jigs, a 3/8 ounce tungsten head, that is a teeny tiny head, especially depending how they use the metal for not just the head, but the bait keeper feature. When you've got something like from Beast Coast Fishing where you have the little Magnum, which is a tungsten head and it's a grass jig, it is just the head that is made of tungsten. The bait keeper feature is a separate wire. It's a double wire bait keeper. So for an application like that, you have this high density, smaller profile, but heavy head that can truly punch down and through vegetation. So if you want to get through it and into the bottom of it, that's where something like a tungsten is going to be much more beneficial for you. Lead is not as dense, but still fairly dense, so you get pretty good but not great bottom composition feel. Tin bismuth, very, very light, not as dense, so you end up with a much larger head. So if you were to stack up a 3/8 ounce football jig for tungsten, lead, and tin bismuth, it'd be small, medium, large in size, going that way because of the density of that material. That can also be extremely good for you going the other way. So I brought up the little Magnum from Beast Coast Fishing, tungsten head, great, because you want to punch into, down, through all that vegetation. You can do that because it's a small head profile with a lot of weight behind it. Well, you can use a lighter material like a tin bismuth to your advantage if you want to slow things down even further, because a 3/8 ounce tin bismuth football jig will have a much larger head, larger surface area, more water displacement, more resistance as it falling through the water, so it will further slow down your rate of fall, in theory. Practicality, I'm not really sure if it's a noticeable difference, but there is a difference from a 3/8 ounce tungsten football jig to a 3/8 ounce tin bismuth. So depending upon what you're trying to get out of your fall rate, that cadence, your reactionary, or slow it down, let them see it bite, that's where different materials can really come into play as well. Something to think about depending upon what you're trying to do, or more importantly, what it is that you're seeing on that body of water as you're trying to further establish what exactly it is that's going to be needed to get them to bite that day. Now, in Jig Fishing 101, I talked about a whole ton of different varieties of jig types. And really in this one, everything that I talked about is really only relative to your very basic traditional jigs. Your football jigs, your arky heads, your grass jigs, your swim jigs. Some of this can also apply to your non-traditional jigs, but are still defined as jigs. Your bladed jigs, your hair jigs, your wobble head jigs, all of that, a lot of that. There's a lot of overlap with everything I talked about that also applies to all those kind of non-standard, non-traditional jigs. So just bear it in mind for whatever it is you are trying to accomplish. But more importantly, if there's anything else that you would like for me to elaborate on, please, down in the comments below, ask that question. I will get to it. You can go down in the video description to any of my social media, and you can find me on Facebook or Instagram. Reach out to me on any of those things as well, and I'll be happy to answer any and all of your questions. I really hope this was another one that was very educational for you guys. If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Also, please leave a like, and again, leave a comment, anything you want to talk about, whether it's feedback or just general comment on how I did the video. Anything and everything is extremely helpful, and I appreciate it, and I enjoy engaging with you guys as well anyway. Aside from all that, every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, on the channel, we do a live stream. We talk about a variety of topics, sometimes things like this, but it's for like an hour and a half plus, and we get to really interact with everybody watching in the live stream chat. So it's a better way for us to get more into the nitty-gritty details that I can't cover the same or as well in a 15 to 20 minute video. So if you're interested in that, please come check out the live streams. I really did hope that you found this helpful. I appreciate everybody that stuck around and watched us to the end. Thank you all very much. Catch you in the next one.